The roofer's text arrived while I was standing in the plumbing aisle of a hardware store 15 minutes from home. Do not come back to the house. Call 911. A second message appeared before I could decide whether he was serious. There's something in the attic above your bedroom. I didn't touch it. For a few seconds, I stood there holding a replacement sink valve, while a store employee rolled a cart of copper fittings past me. An announcement about discounted lawn fertilizer played over the speakers. Everything around me was ordinary enough to make the words on my phone feel unreal. Then Luis Ortega called. "Mr. Callahan, are you still at the store?" "Yes, stay there." Luis had spent 27 years repairing roofs and restoring old homes. He wasn't the kind of contractor who frightened people into paying for work. "What did you find?" "I'm not sure what it is." That answer bothered me more than a dramatic one would have. Luis knew old houses. Callahan Farm had been standing since 1948, and there wasn't much in its walls or attic he hadn't seen somewhere before. "You must have some idea." "I can tell you what it isn't. It isn't part of the roof. It isn't normal ventilation work, and it shouldn't be where it is." The only reason Luis had gone into the attic was a brown stain on the ceiling above my bed. I had noticed it 9 days earlier. It was no wider than my hand and faint at the edges, the kind of mark an old farmhouse collects without asking permission. My wife, Dana, said it was probably an old leak showing through after a humid week. She wanted me to wait. "Let's deal with it after I get back," she had said. "You don't need strangers climbing through the house while I'm gone." Dana was supposed to spend several days with her sister near Asheville. She had left that morning at 8:10 with an overnight bag and a travel mug. Heavy rain was forecast. I had spent 36 years in public education, 17 of them as a principal, telling people that small problems rarely improved because we avoided looking at them. So I called Luis. Now he was telling me not to return to my own property. "Is there a fire?" "Not now." "Gas?" "I didn't smell any." "Then what do I tell 911? "Tell them a contractor found an unidentified concealed object in your attic and believes it may be dangerous." His wording was careful. Not a bomb, not a fire device, not an attempted murder, an unidentified concealed object. That was when I understood he was choosing every word, because someone else might examine them later. "Did you move it?" "No, sir. I took 2 pictures from where I was standing, and then I left." My employee never went inside. My first instinct was to drive home. It wasn't courage. It was ownership. My grandfather bought the first section of Callahan Farm in 1948. My father added neighboring parcels over the years, and I inherited all 62 acres after he died. I had spent most of my life treating the place as something I was responsible for, even when that responsibility became inconvenient. Standing in a parking lot while strangers entered the house felt wrong. "I need to see it," I said. "No, you don't." Luis didn't raise his voice. "That's why I called you from outside." My pride lasted another 3 seconds. Then I called 911. By the time I reached the intersection near Old Hawthorne Road, 2 sheriff's vehicles and a fire truck were blocking the entrance to the farm. Luis stood beside his pickup with his cap in both hands. He looked older than he had that morning. A deputy stopped me before I could approach the house. He confirmed that I owned the property and asked who else lived there. "My wife." "Where is she?" "Driving to Asheville." "Anyone else have a key?" "My daughter used to." I hated how that sounded. Grace had not visited the farm in 3 years. Dana said she returned her key after our last argument, though I had never seen it. The deputy asked about contractors, cleaners, relatives, anyone who could enter without forcing a door. I answered as carefully as I could. Emergency personnel went inside first to determine whether the house presented an immediate danger. I signed a consent form allowing them to enter and address the suspected hazard. Once the scene appeared deliberate, a detective explained that any broader forensic search would be handled separately rather than treating the emergency as permission to search everything I owned. At the time, the distinction felt procedural. Later, it mattered. I waited beside Luis for nearly an hour. He refused to speculate. "I saw something that didn't belong there," he said. "That's all I know." Finally, a fire investigator came down the porch steps. A woman in plain clothes followed him and introduced herself as Detective Rachel Monroe with the Chatham County Sheriff's Office. She didn't offer reassurance before she had facts. "Mr. Callahan, the house is secure for the moment. You can't go inside yet." "What did you find?" a concealed condition above the bedroom that requires further examination. Could a contractor have left it? We're checking the house records and the physical scene. That isn't an answer. No, she said. It isn't. Her refusal irritated me. She wasn't going to fill silence with speculation just because I found uncertainty uncomfortable. The fire investigator glanced toward Luis. Your roofer did the right thing. He didn't move anything, and his photographs show us how the area looked before responders entered. I asked again whether it could be accidental. The investigator considered his words. There are old house problems, he said, and there are things people deliberately conceal. He looked up toward our bedroom window. What we found wasn't left there by a roofer. Dana returned before noon. Her gray SUV turned onto Old Hawthorne Road and stopped beside a deputy's vehicle. She got out before fully closing the door. Her hair had come loose from the clip she usually wore while driving. Her face looked pale, and seeing her produced such immediate relief that I almost laughed. She ran toward me. Henry. Dana wrapped both arms around my chest. I felt her shaking. What happened? Are you hurt? I'm fine. They wouldn't tell me anything. She pulled back and searched my face as if she expected to find an injury I hadn't noticed. This was the Dana I knew. Attentive, composed until someone she loved was threatened. Capable of making the rest of the world feel less important. That was why her next question unsettled me. Did they find anything near the old vent? Rachel stood a few feet away. Dana's eyes shifted toward her. The pause lasted less than a second, but I felt it. What vent? Rachel asked. The one above our bedroom, or near it. I don't know exactly where it runs. No one had told her the object's location. I hadn't known there was an old vent above the bedroom until responders began discussing the attic layout. Dana looked at me. A contractor mentioned something up there last year, didn't he? I don't remember that. The man who checked the insulation. He said there was old material near one of the vents. It was possible. Dana handled most household appointments, especially during my final years as principal. Even after retirement, she continued managing repair schedules because she said I accepted every estimate without negotiating. Possible wasn't the same as convincing. It was enough for me to resist the thought forming beneath it. Rachel didn't accuse her. She asked when Dana had left, where she was going, and when she turned around. About 8:10, Dana said. I was driving to my sister's place outside Asheville. How far had you gone? Past Greensboro, I think. I wasn't watching the exact exit. The timing was tight, but not impossible. Dana had always driven faster than I liked. When did you learn there was a problem? Rachel asked. I called, I said. Dana turned toward me. Right. You called. I saw the missed call and called back. She sounded irritated with herself, not frightened. Rachel wrote something down. Was your sister expecting you? Yes, the answer came quickly. Donna folded her arms against the cool air. Am I being interviewed as a suspect? I'm establishing a timeline. We're doing that with everyone who had access to the property. My husband could have died. We don't yet know the intended outcome. That sentence changed the air between us. Until then, I had treated the attic as a dangerous condition. Rachel was acknowledging, carefully, that someone might have intended a result. Dana moved closer to me. She was sleeping under that ceiling too, I said. Rachel looked at me. Was she? The question offended me. Every night. Including last night? Yes. Rachel nodded. She wasn't suggesting Dana had never shared the danger. She was checking a fact. I resented her for making me hear the difference. A deputy asked Dana whether she would consent to an initial look at messages on her phone related to the morning's travel and household appointments. Dana declined until she could speak with an attorney. That was her right. Rachel said so immediately. Still, I noticed that Dana's hands stopped shaking once the conversation became legal instead of emotional. We spent the next hour at a neighbor's house while investigators completed the safety work. Dana made coffee she didn't drink. She called Martin Sloan, my longtime attorney, without asking me first. Martin needs to know, she said. He's my estate lawyer, not a criminal lawyer. He's your friend. That ended the discussion because I had used the same reasoning for more than 20 years. Martin had been my college roommate, my attorney, and the man who handled Ruth's estate after she died. He drafted the trust for the farm. He reviewed my retirement documents. When I needed an answer I didn't understand, Martin gave me one in language that made me feel I had understood it all along. Dana spoke to him in the next room. Her voice remained low, but I heard my name several times. I heard police, attic, and Grace. Grace's name startled me. My daughter hadn't been near the farm in years. When Dana returned, she said Martin was driving over. Why did you mention Grace? I told him the detective asked who still had keys. That doesn't explain why you brought her up. Because she had a key. Years ago. You said you weren't sure she returned it. Her answer was reasonable. That was one of Dana's strengths. She rarely offered an explanation that could be disproved immediately. She gave you the most defensible version and allowed your own desire for peace to do the rest. Rachel asked to speak with me privately in the neighbor's sunroom. Who benefits financially if you die? The directness embarrassed me, though I couldn't have explained why. My wife receives part of my estate. How much? I'd have to review the trust. Who prepared it? Martin. Does your daughter receive anything? The land eventually passes through the family trust. What does that mean exactly? I removed my glasses and folded them on the table. It was a habit from my years as principal. Students believed it meant I was about to become angry. In truth, I did it when I needed time. Martin manages those details. Rachel watched me. What about life insurance? Dana and Martin had encouraged me to increase the coverage 6 months earlier. Dana called it responsible planning. Martin said the farm created the appearance of wealth while leaving a surviving spouse without enough liquid money. At the time, that sounded sensible. How much? Rachel asked. $3 million. Who is the beneficiary? Dana. Rachel wrote it down. She didn't say motive. She didn't tell me my wife wanted me dead. She asked when the policy had been increased and who took part in the discussions. I answered. Through the glass doors. I could see Dana in the kitchen with her back to me, speaking quietly into her phone. I told myself she called Martin because she was afraid. I told myself she knew about the vent because of some contractor I had forgotten. I told myself the insurance policy proved nothing except that my wife wouldn't be left without money. All 3 statements were true. None made me feel better. Martin reached the farm shortly after 1:30. He had more than enough time to drive from his Chapel Hill office. Though his arrivals still felt fast, because I hadn't asked him to come. He parked beyond the sheriff's vehicles and approached us carrying the same leather case he had owned for years. His navy suit fit well from a distance. Up close, I noticed one cuff had begun to fray. Martin hugged Dana first, then he placed one hand on my shoulder. Henry, thank God. He looked directly into my eyes, as though checking whether I recognized him. I'm fine, physically perhaps. He turned toward Rachel. Martin Sloan. I represent Mr. Callahan in estate and property matters. Are you representing him in connection with this investigation? Rachel asked. Martin looked at me. I'm here as his attorney and friend. It should have reassured me. Instead, I noticed that he had answered without making a clear choice. Rachel suggested I speak with independent counsel before discussing anything in which Martin's own work might become relevant. Martin smiled. That seems premature. The trust and recent insurance changes may be part of the financial background. His expression barely shifted. Henry has discussed the trust and insurance with you. Rachel had not said I discussed them. She said they might be relevant. I saw her notice the distinction. So far, Mr. Callahan has answered basic questions about his affairs, she said. Martin turned to me. What exactly did you tell them? Not whether I was safe, not whether the house could still burn. What did you tell them? I disliked the thought as soon as it formed. Martin had spent his career asking precise questions. His interest could be professional rather than guilty. I had known him since we were 19, a friendship that long deserved more than suspicion born during one frightening afternoon. I told them Dana is the insurance beneficiary, and that the farm is held in trust. Martin exhaled. That's ordinary information. Still, you shouldn't make statements while distressed without counsel present. I'm capable of answering factual questions. Of course you are. He said it too quickly. Rachel asked whether Martin knew of anyone recently working in the attic. He said no. Then he added, the house has undergone decades of repairs. Henry doesn't always remember every contractor. The comment irritated me. I remember the people I hire. I didn't mean anything by it. You said it. Martin lowered his voice. You've had a shock. No one expects perfect recall after something like this. The phrasing stayed with me. Perfect recall. Dana had used similar language during arguments about the farm. No one expects you to remember every detail, Henry. You've been under pressure. Let Martin handle the complicated parts. None was unreasonable by itself. Together, they made me feel as though a conversation about my mind had been taking place without me. Rachel asked Martin, who took control of the trust, if I died. The governing documents speak for themselves, he said. Who? Grace is named in the original structure, but there have been later estate planning discussions. What later discussions? I asked. This isn't the time or place. For most of my life, I had found that sentence reassuring. It usually meant Martin understood more than everyone else, and would decide when we were ready to hear it. Now it sounded like control. That evening, Rachel advised me to stay somewhere not routinely known to everyone with access to the property. Dana cried when I told her. You think I did this? I didn't say that. You're leaving without saying it. It's temporary, because a detective who met us today knows me better than you do. That question found the weak place in me. Dana had stood beside me through retirement, through difficult anniversaries of Ruth's death and my father's death, and through the years after Grace stopped calling. Rachel Monroe knew none of that. I nearly changed my mind. Then Dana said, Martin agrees this is an overreaction. It was the word agrees that stopped me. They had already discussed what I should do. I'm staying somewhere else tonight. Dana's face changed, not dramatically. Her shoulders straightened. For the first time, fear gave way to offense. Martin took me aside near the fence. You're creating unnecessary distance in your marriage. There may be someone trying to kill me. We don't know that. We don't. He softened his tone. Henry, you're understandably confused. Let me manage the legal questions until you've had time to recover. I looked at him. I'm going to hire someone independent. The hand holding his leather case tightened. Independent of what? Everyone being questioned. Martin nodded once. That's your choice. He made it sound like a disappointing decision by a man whose judgment he had already begun to doubt. The cottage my new attorney arranged outside Pittsburgh was small, clean, and anonymous. There were no family photographs and no view of the farm. Rachel met me there that evening. We contacted Dana's sister, she said. Did she confirm the trip? No. Rachel opened her notebook. Her sister says Dana was not expected in Asheville. My first response was to defend Dana. She may have intended to surprise her. That's possible. Or they discussed it and her sister forgot. Also possible. Her willingness to allow those explanations made them less comforting. I wanted resistance, something I could defeat and dismiss. Instead, Rachel left every innocent possibility standing while checking whether the facts supported it. What exactly did her sister say? That no completed visit had been arranged. Dana wasn't expected that morning. Dana called after the emergency began. Rain tapped against the cottage window, the same weather that had caused me to call Louise. Do you think she stayed nearby? I think her account contains a material contradiction. That isn't the same thing. No. Do you think she tried to kill me? I don't have enough evidence to answer that. Her restraint left me alone with the question. Rachel asked me not to confront Dana about her sister's statement. Dana didn't know investigators had checked the alibi, and there was value in hearing whether her account changed without prompting. I agreed. It was harder than I expected. Dana called 3 times that evening. I answered the third. Where are you? Somewhere safe. From me? From whoever had access to the house. You know how that sounds. I know how everything sounds today. She became quiet. Martin said you hired another lawyer. Yes, without talking to me. It's my representation. We've never handled important decisions separately. That was true. Though I could no longer remember when shared decision-making had become Dana and Martin telling me what was best. I need independent advice. You need sleep. Both can be true. She sighed. Familiar sound she used when she believed I was being stubborn, but wanted me to feel that she remained patient. Henry, come to a hotel with me. We can deal with this together. For 11 years, Dana had been the person I turned toward when something frightened me. Refusing her felt less like caution than betrayal. That was my flaw. I understood loyalty as the absence of doubt. Once I trusted someone, questioning them felt morally worse than being wrong. It was one reason Grace and I had stopped speaking. Grace questioned Dana early and directly. Instead of asking why, I treated the question itself as disloyal. I'm staying here tonight. Dana's voice hardened. You've frightened people. Who? Me, Martin. Your friends, you're accusing people without evidence and hiding somewhere no one can reach you. I haven't accused anyone. You left your wife because a detective suggested it. I left the house because someone concealed a danger over my bed. We don't know it was meant for you. That was true. Dana was making the same distinction Rachel made. But from Dana, it sounded like an effort to return the situation to uncertainty before I made a decision she couldn't control. Martin thinks we may need help protecting you from choices you'll regret, she said. I sat straighter. What does that mean? It means you've been under pressure since retirement. You haven't been sleeping. You forget appointments. You've become fixated on keeping the farm, even when it no longer makes financial sense. Are you saying I'm incompetent? No one said that. You said I need protection from my choices. I said we may need help. There it was again. Dana used the word when she wanted her decision to sound shared. Who is we? You and me. Martin too, he's concerned. I nearly told her what Rachel learned from her sister. The words reached the back of my throat. If I spoke them, Dana could revise her story before investigators obtained objective records. More than that, I would be confronting her because uncertainty had become intolerable to me. Rachel warned me about evidence. My attorney warned me about safety. Grace, years earlier, warned me about Dana. I ignored Grace because listening required me to endure uncertainty about my marriage. I didn't want to repeat the same failure because the truth frightened me. I need to go, I said. Henry, I ended the call. Then I opened the voicemail folder on my phone. Grace's final message was still there. I had kept it for 3 years without telling Dana. Dad, I'm not asking you to choose me over your wife, Grace said in the recording. I'm asking you to stop letting her speak for you. I had listened to it dozens of times. I had never called back. Over the next 5 days, no one gave me the quick answer I wanted. Investigators continued checking Dana's travel account. My new attorney requested trust and insurance records. Dana left messages that moved between grief, anger, and careful concern about whether I was thinking clearly. I didn't tell her what her sister had said. On Monday afternoon, October 19th, Dana left a message saying she had spoken with someone who could help us create a temporary structure until the crisis passed. At 4:15, a uniformed deputy knocked on the cottage door, carrying a large envelope. The heading referred to a special proceeding in Chatham County. Dana's name appeared as the petitioner. She was asking a court to determine whether I was capable of managing my own affairs. Concealed danger in the attic had failed to remove me from the farm. Now someone was trying to remove the farm from me. The court papers didn't take anything away from me. They began a process. Dana was asking for a hearing on whether I could manage my affairs and whether someone should be appointed if the court decided I could not. The packet included notice of the proceeding and the appointment of a guardian ad litem attorney. I could also continue with the lawyer I had retained. I still controlled the trust. I still had access to my accounts. Dana's allegations had not become findings, but they had acquired a case number. That made the second attack feel different. The attic had been meant to remove my body from the farmhouse. This could remove my authority while leaving me alive to watch it happen. My attorney read the petition in silence the next morning. She cannot declare you incompetent, she said. There will be notice, representation, an opportunity to respond, and a hearing. I understand. You look as though you don't. I folded the papers into a clean stack, then unfolded them because the gesture felt defensive. Dana described me as increasingly confused since retirement. She listed appointments I had forgotten, bills I had paid twice, and one morning when I drove halfway toward Raleigh, before remembering a meeting had moved online. All 3 incidents were real. That was what made the filing dangerous. I had forgotten appointments. I paid the same water bill twice after the utility company mailed a duplicate notice. I drove toward Raleigh on habit after spending years attending meetings there. None of those things prevented me from understanding my finances or managing the farm. But Dana had collected them without telling me. She also described my refusal to sell Callahan Farm as evidence that I could no longer make rational financial decisions. She said I was emotionally fixated on my father's wishes and unable to evaluate an offer that could provide security for the rest of my life. The property had been appraised at more than $8 million. A land assembler had discussed a higher development price if several conditions were met. Donna presented my refusal as though no competent person could disagree with her. Then the petition reached Grace. Dana wrote that my estranged daughter had returned suddenly, after years of little contact, and was attempting to influence me, because she expected to inherit the farm. Grace had not returned. I hadn't called her. Yet Dana and Martin had already prepared an explanation for what it would mean if I did. "Who wrote this?" I asked. Dana's attorney filed it. That isn't what I asked. Several phrases sounded like Martin. Practical management of complex assets. Increasing emotional volatility. A pattern of impaired judgment. Martin used similar language at the farm when he said I couldn't be expected to have perfect recall after a shock. He didn't sign Dana's petition. He didn't appear as her attorney. On paper, he remained separate, but I could hear his voice inside it. My attorney recommended that I agree to an independent evaluation. I refused before she finished. "There's nothing wrong with my mind." I didn't say there was. "Then, why should I submit testing?" "Because my wife collected a list of mistakes. Because the court will need more than your assurance. I ran schools for 17 years, and a retired principal can still be evaluated." The answer embarrassed me enough to make me angry. That anger frightened me. Dana had learned something about me during our marriage. If she questioned my judgment, I became determined to prove I needed no one's help. I hid ordinary lapses because admitting them felt like surrender. Once I left my glasses in the refrigerator after carrying in groceries. Dana laughed when she found them. A week later, during an argument about the farm, she reminded me of it. After that, I began checking rooms before she entered them. I made sure nothing had been misplaced. If I forgot a name, I pretended I hadn't heard it. I had helped her build the secrecy she later used against me. "I'll do the evaluation," I said. My attorney nodded but didn't praise me. That helped. Dana had submitted short audio clips with the petition. In one, I complained the farm had become a burden. In another, I said I was tired of everyone telling me what to do. Then my attorney played the last one. My own voice filled the room. "Grace only cares about the farm." The clip lasted 4 seconds. I remembered saying the words. That was the worst part. Dana hadn't created the sentence. She had removed everything before and after it. I had given her the weapon. She had chosen where to point it. 1 week after the petition was served, Rachel asked me to return to her office. By then, the legal case had become part of my daily routine. I met with my attorney, scheduled the evaluation, and answered questions about decisions made years earlier. Rachel placed no dramatic folder on the table. She had a notebook and several pages turned face down. "We received some of the records through the appropriate legal process," she said. "Some? Not everything arrives at once." Dana had not driven toward Asheville. A motel approximately 12 miles from Callahan Farm had a reservation in a different name. Payment records and video established that Dana used the room on the morning Luis inspected the attic. She arrived before 9. Martin arrived later. He stayed less than an hour. For several seconds, I focused on the least important detail. What name did she use? Rachel told me. I had never heard it. "You believe they were having an affair." The records establish an undisclosed meeting. Other communications support a personal relationship. An affair, yes. The word didn't land the way I expected. I imagined discovering Dana with another man would produce anger first. Instead, I felt embarrassed, as though the affair had taken place in front of everyone except me. Then I pictured Martin entering the motel room, while something remained hidden above my bed. The embarrassment turned colder. Dana had purchased ordinary materials before the incident. The purchase used a business card associated with Martin's law firm. "That connects him," I said. "It connects the payment. He paid for what was in my attic. We can't say that from one transaction." Dana had previously used the same card while doing legitimate consulting work for Martin. The purchase could be presented as ordinary business activity. There was more. Records from the service managing our home camera account showed access while Dana was away from the farm. The records did not show exactly what anyone watched. They showed that an account associated with Dana had been used from a device connected to her during the relevant period. The cameras covered the front drive, side entrance, and lower hallway. She could have watched the emergency vehicles arrive. She could have known when Luis left, or she could have checked the cameras because she was a homeowner who received a frightening call. None of it proved who had placed the danger in the attic. The motel could establish a secret meeting. The card could establish a purchase. The account records could establish access. Their force came from the way they converged around the same morning. Rachel showed me a still image from the motel's exterior camera. Dana stood near the room door. Martin was beside her, turned partly away. The picture was ordinary. No embrace, no secret document, no object passed between them. Two people stood outside a motel room on a gray October morning. One was my wife. The other had been my closest friend since college. Does Dana know you have this? No. Does Martin? We haven't disclosed it. My attorney asked about the land assembler. Rachel said its representatives appeared to believe Martin was pursuing a legitimate agreement. Nothing showed they knew about the attic danger or fraudulent estate work. That answer mattered. I didn't need the story to become larger, just because larger villains would make my anger easier to organize. Two people I trusted were enough. Rachel asked whether I possessed original copies of my trust, insurance documents, and Martin's correspondence about the property. Some are at the farm. My attorney spoke before I could. You will retrieve only records you own or have always been authorized to access. You will not search Dana's private possessions. If you find something unexpected, stop and call me. The farmhouse had been cleared for limited daytime access. The main hazard was gone, but I still couldn't sleep there. The next morning, I drove to Callahan Farm. A deputy waited outside. The house smelled closed and cold. Dana hadn't returned since investigators completed the initial work. A thin layer of dust covered the dining table. Her coffee cup still sat beside the sink. I went to the office off the kitchen, where we kept tax records, insurance statements, repair invoices, and estate papers. The cabinet wasn't Dana's private property. I had used it for years. I had my own key. I found the insurance file first. The trust documents weren't where I remembered leaving them. Behind a folder labeled Kankakee Tax, I saw the corner of a cream-colored envelope. There wasn't one envelope. There were dozens. I recognized Grace's handwriting before I saw her name. I didn't touch them at first. My attorney had told me to stop if I found something unexpected. The envelopes had been stored behind tax files and old insurance statements. Some were sealed. Others had been opened carefully along one edge. All were addressed to me. Several had been mailed to the farm. The top envelope was already open, and the edge of a birthday card remained partly exposed. I photographed it where it lay before sliding it free. I read that one card. Then I stopped and waited for my attorney. The front showed a watercolor sailboat. Inside, Grace had written, "I don't know whether you'll read this, but Noah still asks about the apple trees. I told him they'll be there when you're ready." A photograph slipped onto the desk. Noah stood beside a bicycle, taller than I remembered, holding a school certificate. Dana told me Grace stopped sending birthday cards because she wanted to punish me. I had believed her. My attorney arrived 25 minutes later. She documented the cabinet and called Rachel. Once the materials were preserved, I read more. One letter asked me to meet Grace alone. She wrote that she didn't want to discuss the farm, my will, or Dana. She wanted 1 hour in a public place where no one would speak for either of us. At the bottom, she wrote, "Please call me yourself, Dad, even if the answer is no." I had never seen it. File also contained printed copies of emails I recognized. They were the messages Dana showed me, the ones in which Grace accused me of wasting her inheritance and called me weak. Beside them were photocopies of phrases from Grace's real letters. Certain sentences had been underlined. Grace once wrote, "I don't recognize the way you talk to me anymore." One false email said, "I don't recognize the weak man you've become." That didn't prove who created the account. It was enough to make me check the addresses. Grace's real email ended with her full last name. The false messages used the same name with one letter missing. I had never noticed. Dana always printed the emails instead of forwarding them. I considered that helpful, because I disliked reading long messages on a phone. Paper had hidden the address bar. Possession didn't prove authorship. An altered address didn't identify who created it. But the letters proved something simpler and more painful. Grace had tried. I had not. Dana lied to me, but she hadn't stopped me from picking up a phone. She hadn't made me avoid Grace at family funerals. She hadn't made me tell mutual friends that my daughter cared more about inheritance than family. She gave me a story. I accepted it because the story protected my marriage and my pride. At the bottom of the cabinet was a letter marked personal. "Please read alone." Grace wrote that Martin had contacted her privately. He suggested that continued opposition to a future sale could create expensive litigation. He said there might be a financial resolution if she agreed not to challenge decisions made by Dana and me. Grace wrote, "He spoke as if you had already chosen, and as if my only concern could be money." That frightened me more than the offer. I remained at the farm after my attorney and Rachel left. The deputy waited outside. I walked upstairs but stopped before entering the bedroom. The ceiling had been opened during the investigation. Plastic sheeting covered part of the wall. The stain that started everything was surrounded by pencil marks and evidence tags. I spent the previous week believing the attic was the beginning of the attack. It wasn't. Someone had been changing my understanding of my own family for years. I sat on the top step and opened my phone. Grace's number was still saved. My thumb rested over it for nearly a minute. I thought about leading with the letters, the investigation, or the fact that my life had been threatened. All of those beginnings made me the victim before I admitted what I had done to her. I pressed call. Grace answered on the fourth ring. "It's Dad, I know." Her voice was flatter than I remembered. "I found your letters." The silence changed. "Which ones?" "All of them, I think." "No," she said. "Not all." I closed my eyes. "Grace, I need to see you." "Because you believe me now?" "Yes, that wasn't my question." Then she asked, "Are you calling because you finally believe me? Or because you finally need me?" Grace agreed to meet 3 days later. She chose my attorney's office rather than the cottage or the farm. A neutral room gave her a door she could leave through. She arrived carrying a canvas work bag and a thin document case. Her hair was shorter than the last time I saw her. She wore Ruth's silver pendant against a dark sweater. For one foolish moment, I expected her to hug me. She didn't. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Physically, yes." She nodded and sat across from me. My attorney remained. Rachel joined us only after Grace agreed to provide a formal statement. I began with the apology I had practiced. "Dana made me believe." Grace raised one hand. "Don't," I stopped. "She lied to me." "Yes." "She showed me messages that looked like they came from you." "Yes." "She told me you returned your key and wanted no contact." "I know what she told you." Her fingers closed around Ruth's pendant. "I'm trying to explain." "That's the problem, Dad. You always explain before you listen." Grace opened the document case. Inside were copies of letters, postal receipts, and printed emails she sent over the years. "After Dana denied receiving the first 2 letters, I started keeping records," she said. "Not because I thought I'd need them for police. Because every conversation with her ended with me wondering whether I remembered it correctly." She placed a page in front of me. It was an email from Martin. He wrote that disputes over inherited property could become destructive and expensive. He suggested there might be a substantial private settlement if Grace agreed not to challenge a future transfer, supported by Dana and me. The message didn't threaten her. It didn't confess to fraud. It assumed my decisions would eventually align with Dana's and that Grace's resistance could be reduced to a price. "Why didn't you show me this?" I tried. "You could have come to the school." "I did." I looked at her. "Dana met me in the parking lot. She said you asked her to keep family conflict away from your staff." I remembered that day. Dana told me Grace appeared at work, shouting about the farm. She said she sent Grace away to protect me from embarrassment. I had never asked a receptionist, teacher, or security officer what actually happened. Grace placed another set of notes on the table. 3 years earlier, Dana asked her to sign a statement describing my forgetfulness. Dana said it was only for future planning, and that Martin wanted supporting information from family. Grace refused. She asked whether you repeated questions, Grace said. Whether you became angry when people challenged you, whether you made emotional decisions about the farm. I didn't know. No, you didn't. The words weren't cruel, that made them harder to hear. I thought you were trying to control me. I was trying to get you to speak to someone who wasn't Dana or Martin. You were angry. I was. You said things about my marriage. I did. There it was, the part I wanted. Proof that Grace hadn't behaved perfectly. For a second, I felt relief. If she had been harsh, then perhaps the estrangement remained shared enough that I didn't have to carry its full weight. Grace saw it on my face. "Do you want me to say I handled everything well?" "No. I didn't. I was grieving, Mom. I was scared and I was angry. But I never sent those emails. I never asked for the farm. And I never stopped trying to speak to you. I looked at the receipts spread across the table. Donna lied, Martin pressured Grace. But neither forced me to assume my daughter's anger meant greed. I chose the explanation that asked less of me, I said. Grace's expression changed slightly, not forgiveness, attention. If I believed you, I would have had to question Dana, and Martin, and myself. Yes, I didn't want to do that. No, I'm sorry. Grace looked toward the window. I believe you're sorry today. The limitation was deliberate. Today was not 3 years. One apology wasn't a repaired relationship. I'll give Detective Monroe the records, she said. I'll answer questions. I'll help establish what happened. Thank you. But that's not the same as everything being all right between us. I understand. You say that now. She was right to doubt me. Grace established boundaries before we left the room. We would communicate directly. Noah would not carry messages. I would not make a property decision to prove I trusted her. She would not become responsible for managing my fear simply because Dana no longer could. I accepted every condition. By the end of Grace's formal statement, the story had changed. Concealed danger above my bed wasn't an isolated attempt followed by a desperate legal maneuver. Donna and Martin spent years weakening the one relationship most likely to challenge them. They made Grace appear greedy before they needed to claim she was manipulating me. They collected examples of my forgetfulness before they needed to question my competence. The physical danger hadn't started the conspiracy. It had been the final step in a much older one. That afternoon, my attorney completed her first review of the trust documents. She placed the signed trust in front of me. Grace is the first successor trustee, she said. Dana has a limited right to remain in the farmhouse and a fixed bequest. She does not inherit control of the farm. Martin said there were later documents. I found references to a proposed amendment. Did I sign it? I can find no executed amendment replacing Grace. I thought of Dana waiting in a motel room 12 miles from the house, believing my death would give her control of property she didn't legally own. Then I thought of Martin. He drafted the legitimate trust. He knew exactly what Dana would receive. If she believed otherwise, only one person had been in a position to make that lie sound like law. My attorney spent the next 2 days reviewing every estate document we could obtain without entering Martin's office. Grace helped organize them. She didn't do it as my daughter. Not at first. She approached the work the way she handled construction projects, separating what existed from what people claimed existed. She created a list of dates, signatures, witnesses, billing entries, and missing attachments. This is the trust you signed, she said. This is the deed transferring the farm into it. These are the later changes concerning Dana's occupancy and cash bequest. She tapped an empty line near the bottom. And this is where Martin says another amendment should be. Nothing was attached. My attorney had requested Martin's complete client file after I terminated his representation. His office delivered 3 boxes and an electronic folder. The production included years of correspondence, invoices, draft language, and closing records. It didn't include an executed amendment replacing Grace. There were references to an invoice from the previous year listed consultation regarding successor authority and marital beneficiary concerns. A second entry referred to preparation of a proposed amendment. The document was missing. Could I have signed it and forgotten? Grace didn't answer. My attorney did. It's possible for someone to forget signing a document. That's different from finding evidence that it was properly executed. She pointed to the legitimate trust. This has your signature, witness information, notarization, a transmittal letter, and a billing record. Then she pointed to the empty line. For the supposed later amendment, we have references to discussions and drafting. We don't have a signed original, a complete copy, a transmittal letter, or any communication from you approving final language. Martin told Dana it existed. We believe he may have. We don't yet have proof of exactly what he said. Grace leaned back. Dana behaved as though she already had control. She may have believed she did, I said. Grace studied me. It was the first time I suggested Dana might also have been deceived by Martin. I didn't mean she was innocent. Dana concealed letters, fabricated my daughter's voice, lied about Asheville, met Martin at a motel, and helped build a case against my mind. Whatever Martin told her, she made choices of her own. But if he lied to her, then they weren't standing on the same ground. My attorney called Martin while Grace and I were present. Conversation was placed on speaker with his knowledge. Your file production appears incomplete, she said. I disagree. We have no executed version of the amendment you referenced after the incident. I referred to later estate planning discussions. You referred to a later instrument. Martin paused. There were several drafts. Was one executed? I'd need to review the archive. You already had that opportunity. I have a law practice to manage. My attorney asked whether he possessed an original document signed by me that removed Grace as successor trustee. Martin didn't answer directly. Henry's intentions evolved. My intentions aren't the question, I said. Another pause. You're under extraordinary pressure, Henry. I asked whether I signed it. You may not remember every document we reviewed. There it was again, not an answer, a suggestion about my memory. I remember signing the trust. Yes, 14 years ago. I remember changing Dana's occupancy rights. We discussed several revisions. Did I sign the amendment replacing Grace? Martin exhaled quietly. This is exactly why complex matters shouldn't be reduced to questions in a crowded room. There were 4 people in the conference room. He made it sound like a mob. My attorney ended the call after instructing him to preserve every file connected to my estate. The farm, Dana, the land assembler, and the capacity discussions. We didn't yet have proof of forgery. We had something narrower and increasingly difficult for Martin to explain. He insisted that a later document controlled the farm, yet he couldn't produce a signed copy or a normal execution record. Rachel later confirmed one fact the land assembler had voluntarily provided. Martin had not merely expected ordinary legal fees. He negotiated a substantial success payment if he delivered an agreement giving the company control of the transaction. How substantial? I asked. About $1.2 million. I thought of Martin's frayed cuff, his reduced office staff, and the way his hand tightened around his leather case when I said I wanted another attorney. For the first time, I wondered whether my oldest friend had been protecting my estate or waiting for the right moment to sell it out from under me. Rachel briefed my attorney and me without Grace in the room. Grace was still a witness. Her letters, notes, and Martin's message mattered because they came from her own experience. Rachel didn't want Grace's recollection shaped by financial records or communications she had never seen. Rachel gave us only the parts necessary to explain Martin's motive and the danger surrounding the property. The public version of Martin Sloan was a successful attorney approaching retirement on his own terms. The financial records told a different story. Martin owed approximately $1.4 million through personal loans, failed investments, and obligations tied to his practice. His office had quietly reduced staff. Several payments had been delayed. He borrowed money to conceal earlier losses, then borrowed again to keep those losses from becoming visible. The land fee wouldn't have made him secure. It would have postponed collapse. Why would they pay him that much? I asked. The fee was tied to delivering a binding land control agreement and keeping the transaction moving, Rachel said. Could he sell the farm without me? Not cleanly, my attorney answered. As long as you remain competent and control the trust, your authorization matters. If you died, the legitimate trust would place Grace in authority. If a court restricted your decision-making, there would still be process and outside scrutiny. Then, what was Martin selling? The appearance that he could deliver control. That explained the false amendment. It explained the incapacity file. It didn't fully explain why he and Dana crossed from manipulation into trying to end my life. The financial structure came into focus. Donna expected $3 million in insurance if I died. Martin led her to believe a later amendment gave her control of the property. The farm's current appraised value was about $8.2 million. Dana and Martin spoke as though it was worth $11 million, but that higher figure depended on neighboring acquisitions, approvals, road access, and future development. It wasn't $11 million sitting in a bank. To Dana, it had become something close to that. Insurance money, immediately control afterward. A new life with Martin once the transaction moved forward. Martin, meanwhile, concealed the size of his fee from her. They committed themselves to the same outcome while expecting different rewards. Later that afternoon, my attorney explained the property implications to Grace. She didn't receive tactical details or copies of Martin's private financial records. She learned only that his debts were severe, His fee depended on delivering control, and the legitimate trust didn't give Dana that control. He needed the sale, Grace said. Dana needed to believe she'd control it, and they both needed me out of the way. My attorney didn't correct me, but she didn't confirm more than the evidence supported. The incompetency case continued. A hearing hadn't taken place, and Dana hadn't gained control. But the filing existed. Her lawyer was asking whether major property decisions should pause until my capacity was evaluated. After my attorney informed the land assembler that Martin no longer represented me and that authority over the transaction was disputed, the company paused negotiations. That was a commercial precaution, not a ruling against me. Still, it showed how an unresolved accusation could freeze an important decision before anyone reached the truth. Then there was Grace. She believed Dana and Martin had targeted me. She agreed the farm had to be protected. She still didn't trust me. We met for breakfast once that week. I tried to ask about Noah. Grace answered politely, then returned to the documents. "You don't have to work on this every day," I said. "I know, you have your job, your family. I know that too. I don't want you to feel responsible for fixing everything." Her pen stopped. That's what Mom used to say before handing me 3 things she didn't have time to do. I almost smiled. Grace didn't. "I'm helping establish facts. I'm not taking over your life. I understand. And I'm not becoming trustee tomorrow because you feel guilty. I didn't ask you to." "You were about to," she was right. Part of me wanted to transfer authority to her immediately, not because it was necessary, but because it would serve as a grand gesture. I could prove I trusted her without doing the slower work of becoming trustworthy. Grace saw the shortcut before I did. "I won't let Dana and Martin take your choices from you," she said. "But I'm not going to take them either." That evening, I considered selling the farm, not to Dana's developer, not through Martin. I imagined choosing a legitimate buyer, taking the money, and ending the struggle that had grown around 62 acres of orchard, pasture, and family expectation. If the farm disappeared, perhaps the motive disappeared with it. Then I remembered the attic, the false emails, capacity file prepared before I knew anyone questioned my mind. Selling wouldn't undo those things. It would allow fear to make the final decision. The next morning, Martin sent a formal request for a settlement meeting. He proposed that Dana, Martin, and I meet at the detached farm office. He claimed the development opportunity and the capacity dispute could still be resolved without further public conflict. Grace read the letter. She pointed to the last sentence. "This may be Henry's last opportunity to resolve the matter voluntarily." "That's the word he used with me," she said. "Voluntarily," when he offered to make the inheritance dispute disappear. It sounded reasonable. That was why Martin liked it. He used the word voluntary when the alternative had already been made frightening enough to force agreement. My evaluation took place over 2 appointments. I expected humiliation. Instead, I found ordinary questions asked without accusation. The evaluator reviewed my medical history, medications, finances, family relationships, and understanding of the legal dispute. She asked me to explain the trust in my own words. She asked what would happen if I sold the farm, kept it, or transferred authority. She tested memory and attention. I missed one item on a delayed recall exercise. The evaluator noticed my reaction. "Does that bother you?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because my wife has been keeping records of everything I forget." That wasn't my question. I looked at my hands. "Because I think forgetting one thing may make people doubt everything." At the second appointment, she asked why I hid ordinary lapses from Dana. I told her about the glasses in the refrigerator, duplicate water bill, and the meeting moved online. I explained how Dana used each incident later during unrelated arguments. "So you began concealing mistakes," the evaluator said. "Yes." "Did it make you less forgetful?" "No." "What did it protect?" I thought of Grace. "My pride." The report didn't say I had perfect memory. It said the available information supported my ability to understand my circumstances, evaluate options, appreciate consequences, and manage my affairs. It also documented significant stress. My attorney considered that distinction important. "Don't treat this as proof that Dana invented every concern. Treat it as independent evidence that the conclusion she wants doesn't follow from the incidents she collected." The report weakened the petition. It didn't end it immediately. Legal processes moved through notice, responses, professional opinions, and court schedules. Dana's attorney could question the report or seek another evaluation. Still, the balance changed. Dana and Martin expected me to refuse. My anger would become evidence of volatility. My refusal would become evidence of paranoia. My insistence that everyone simply trust me would support the claim that I rejected reasonable safeguards. Instead, I cooperated. They needed me to defend my dignity through isolation. It was the same mistake I made with Grace. Once I understood that, I saw the settlement requests differently. Donna and Martin still needed something from me. A signature, a voluntary appearance of agreement, control of the original trust records, something they could present as my decision rather than their pressure. Grace helped my attorney and me prepare before Rachel arrived. She drew 2 columns in her notebook. What they may think Dad knows, what Dad actually knows. They know you no longer accept Dana's trip at face value, she said. They may suspect the motel records have surfaced, but they can't know what investigators received. She listed the other uncertainties. Dana and Martin knew I replaced him as my lawyer. They knew the capacity petition hadn't frightened me into immediate surrender. They didn't know whether I found the letters, how much of the trust had been reviewed, or whether investigators confirmed Martin's financial problems. They expect you to be ashamed of the evaluation, Grace said. I was. They expect you to want the petition to disappear. I do, and they expect you to protect the marriage from public embarrassment. I rubbed my thumb over Ruth's old watch band. Grace closed her notebook. You don't need to pretend to be weak. You need to stop pretending you aren't tired. When Rachel arrived, Grace gave her the 2-column page, answered one question about Martin's past behavior, and left. She was helping me understand the people involved. She wasn't joining a police operation. Rachel then met privately with my attorney and me. We can't arrange a meeting because we hope someone will confess, she said. We can't ask you to fabricate evidence, sign a false document, or provoke a new offense. My attorney added one rule. You sign nothing. I nodded. What do you want from the meeting? Rachel asked. I want Martin to identify the document he says controls the trust. I want to understand what Dana believes she was promised, and I want to know why they still need my signature. They may say nothing useful. Then they say nothing useful. Then they leave. Rachel capped her pen. The meeting isn't the case. We already have evidence. At most, this gives us limited clarification. That was when I understood how to approach Martin. I didn't need him to explain everything. I needed him to hear me describe his work incorrectly. I'll take the meeting, I said, but I'm not going there to confess anything for them. What are you going there to do? I'm going to let them correct me. The meeting wasn't our idea. That mattered. Martin requested it in writing. Dana followed with 2 messages urging me to settle before the capacity dispute became more damaging. They needed my cooperation. The authorities were willing to manage the meeting because refusing it might push Dana and Martin toward another location or another kind of pressure. I would knowingly participate in a recorded conversation. The recording could preserve what they chose to say. It couldn't authorize searches or create a case that didn't already exist. Any warrant had to stand on evidence collected before we entered that room. No one promised arrests. They could arrive, say nothing useful, and leave. They could sense the operation. They could cancel. Uncertainty remained part of the plan. My attorney refused the use of a false trust amendment or any document pretending to transfer property. Instead, I would bring copies of the legitimate trust and a preliminary unsigned land proposal prepared by independent counsel. Neither document committed me to anything. I would tell the truth. The petition frightened me. The public conflict embarrassed me. I wanted to understand whether settlement was possible. Grace helped me organize questions based only on facts I knew. What exact document gave Dana authority? When did I supposedly sign it? Why did Martin need to control Grace's copy of the original trust? What did Dana believe would happen if I no longer controlled the property? Why did Martin still need my signature? On the night before the meeting, Grace sat across from me at the cottage table. Don't turn this into the one thing that proves you deserve forgiveness, she said. I won't. You don't know that. No, I don't. If the meeting fails, you still have to do the work between us. I know. If it succeeds, you still have to do the work. I know that too. She studied me. I won't be there. I didn't expect you to be. I'm not hiding. I'm choosing not to become the reason they perform for the room. Her absence wasn't fear, it was agency. Dana and Martin built their story around Grace as the greedy daughter returning for the farm. Keeping her outside deprived them of that role. The next afternoon, Rachel walked me through the detached farm office. My father had converted the old equipment building in the 1980s. It had 2 exits, a small bathroom, and windows overlooking the pasture. Nothing blocked either door. Officers would remain close but out of sight. Rachel showed me the point at which she would end the meeting if someone tried to move me, isolate me, or introduce an unexpected physical risk. "If you want out," she said, "say you need your medication from the cottage. I don't take medication in the afternoon. They don't know every detail." Martin might. I had known him for more than 40 years. Rachel saw the hesitation. "Use it anyway." At 5:10, Dana texted me, "Bring the signed trust. Martin says he has to inspect the original execution pages before he can certify which instrument controls." I showed the message to Rachel. "You're not bringing the original." What do I tell her? The truth. "Your attorney has it." I typed the response. Donna didn't answer. At 5:28, Martin's sedan turned onto Old Hawthorne Road. Donna followed in her SUV rather than riding with him. They had arrived separately. I stood alone inside the farm office with the copy folder on the table. Martin entered first, carrying the worn leather case. Dana came in behind him. She didn't hug me. Martin looked at the folder, then the empty chairs. "Where is Grace?" "She isn't coming." Dana's expression tightened. Martin placed his case on the table. "That may be for the best." He sat without removing his coat. Dana remained standing. "Before we start," she said, holding out her hand, "put your phone on the table." I looked at her open palm. That request hadn't been part of the plan. Martin remained beside the table. "No calls," he said. "No interruptions. If we're going to resolve this, the conversation stays in this room." In my ear, Rachel's voice was calm. "Do not surrender the phone." "I'm keeping it," I said. Dana's hand remained out. "My attorney told me to." "Your attorney isn't here," she said. "No, but I'm still following her advice." Martin's eyes moved from the phone to my face. Donna slowly lowered her hand. Martin drew the nearest window shade and sat down beside his case. The 2 exits remained open. Rachel and the officers were still close. But Dana and Martin were already testing how much control I brought into the room and how much I was willing to surrender. The trap didn't have to become violent, to become dangerous. It only had to make them wonder why I was no longer obeying. Martin opened his leather case and removed a yellow legal pad. "We're here to reduce conflict," he said. "That would be good." Dana sat beside him, leaving the chair across from me empty. For years, that arrangement would have worked. Dana beside Martin. Me alone. I looked tired because I was tired. That helped. Martin began with the capacity petition. He described it as an unfortunate response to an unstable situation, rather than a plan prepared in advance. "If you demonstrate that you understand the financial realities," he said, "Dana is willing to reconsider how aggressively the proceeding moves forward." Dana said nothing. "So the petition can disappear if I sign?" I asked. Martin's expression tightened. "No one said that." "What did you say?" "I said cooperation changes circumstances." "That sounds similar." "It isn't." I nodded as if the distinction confused me. Martin leaned forward. "The land opportunity remains viable. The assembler is prepared to continue if questions about authority are resolved." "What questions? Who speaks for the trust now and later?" "I speak for it now." "Yes, and Grace speaks for it later." Dana looked at Martin. He answered carefully. "Under the original structure." I let the silence sit. Martin hated silence when he believed someone misunderstood him. In college, he corrected professors under his breath. As an attorney, he corrected clients by making them feel grateful for the correction. "What changed?" I asked. There were later discussions. "Did I sign something?" "You approved revisions." "That isn't what I asked." Dana shifted in her chair. Martin looked at her, then back at me. "You reviewed an amendment. Did I sign it? You understood what it was intended to accomplish." "That sounds like no." "It means memory is not the only way to establish intent." The sentence was quiet. It also gave me more than he intended. He wasn't relying on a clear signed document. He was preparing an explanation for why the signature problem could be overcome. I opened the folder and removed a copy of the legitimate trust. "This says Grace takes over after I die." Martin didn't touch it. "That version predates later planning." "Then why do you need this one?" "To compare execution pages." "Against what?" He paused. A later instrument. Where is it? In secure storage. My attorney had asked that question several times. He had never answered. Why didn't you give it to my new lawyer? Because I dispute the scope of her request. Is it my document? Martin's jaw tightened. You're reducing a complex professional issue to ownership of paper. Dana leaned toward him. Show him. Martin didn't look at her. This isn't the place. She stared at him. You said he signed it. I said the amendment reflected his approved intentions. No. You said he signed it. Martin finally turned. Dana, not now. The first crack appeared without me touching it. I kept my voice even. What did the amendment give, Dana? Martin answered before she could. Continuity. I looked at him as though I didn't understand. Meaning what? Authority to preserve the household and continue negotiations without disruption. Could she sell the farm? Not unilaterally. Dana's head turned toward him. That's not what you told me. He ignored her. I asked. What did you tell her? This is exactly the kind of emotional confusion we're trying to avoid. Dana's face changed, not because he insulted me, because he had included her in the confusion. You told me I'd control the property, she said. Control is not the same as unrestricted ownership. You didn't use that word before. You heard what you wanted to hear. For the first time, Martin sounded less like an attorney and more like a man cornered by his own promises. Dana looked at me. Henry, he said the amendment protected me. He said Grace couldn't remove me from the house or block the agreement. Legitimate trust already gave you a right to stay. She looked back at Martin. You told me it didn't. Martin's eyes sharpened. Dana, this conversation is about settlement. No, this conversation is about what you told me. I let them talk. That was the hardest part. Every sentence about my death, my property, and my daughter invited me to interrupt. I wanted to accuse them of the attic, the motel, the false emails. Rachel's instruction remained clear. Ask only what I knew. Don't turn suspicion into certainty before the evidence did. I looked at Dana. What did you believe would happen if I died? Martin answered. That is not an appropriate question. I asked her. Dana stared at the table. I believed the insurance would cover immediate expenses. How much? You know how much. 3 million. Yes. And the farm? She glanced at Martin. I believed I would be in control long enough to complete the transaction. Why did you believe that? Because he told me. Martin spoke through his teeth. I told you the estate plan could be structured to avoid disruption. Could be structured, Dana said. You told me it was done. He